Have you ever noticed that when you try to adjust to a new environment, maybe it's for the best you just be yourself instead of listening to someone whose advice might not work for everyone? Well, that's what Lincoln and Clyde found out in the episode I'm going to talk about today. So join me as I, SteamTeamRedubUK, CC Trainor-Ling, bring you another retro review from past seasons of The Loud House. Cue the intro! Today's episode is Middlemen. In this episode, Lincoln and Clyde go on a tour of Royal Woods Middle School, and Lynn gives them some advice that ends up being more useless than useful. For a long time, I've met fans who either didn't like this episode at all or just thought it was merely okay. As for me, I think this is one of the best episodes of the third season. I credit a lot of that to Lynn, whose role was genuine and, to a degree, very sympathetic. She wanted to volunteer as a tour guide and teach Lincoln and Clyde how to survive the jungle known as middle school. Her intentions in this episode, while very questionable in terms of the advice she was giving, were never meant to hurt anyone. She thought Lincoln and Clyde wouldn't know how to handle themselves in a new and somewhat intimidating environment, and I think we can all relate to that. Going from the top of the food chain in elementary school to the bottom of the barrel as incoming middle school students can be a very scary thing, and Lynn didn't want those two fifth graders to fall victim to what she went through. Each time Lincoln and Clyde did something she thought was a sign of weakness, she told them about a student who did what they did and her life was a living hell because of it. So the boys agree to follow Lynn's advice, which leads to them unintentionally ruining photo projects for some of the middle schoolers and inadvertently punishing a few more because of their actions. Basically, using Lynn's useful advice got other kids in trouble for no good reason. Still, I can't really blame these two impressionable kids for willingly listening to Lynn's advice, because you have to remember they don't know what it's like to be in middle school, and Lynn is the one who has the experience. Listening to someone who's been there and wanting to avoid problems makes a lot of sense in context. But regardless, Lynn's advice led to Clink and McCloud being told they're going to get beaten up after school, and that's when Lynn reveals the truth behind those stories she told earlier. It turned out those very specific stories about that new student were actually about her when she first started middle school. She thought acting tough would help her adjust to her new environment and figured her advice would help Lincoln and Clyde avoid the very same problem she once had. She owned up to her mistake and was willing to fight the kids who were threatening to beat up her brother and his best friend. She was ready to take a literal beating for giving advice that clearly only worked for her. What she was prepared to do is what a good big sister should do, and I give her major props for that. However, Lincoln and Clyde said they were going to take their lumps because they were the ones who messed up, but surprisingly, those middle schoolers were never going to hurt them. They just wanted to make them sweat a little. Kind of a weird twist ending, but maybe they knew Lincoln and Clyde were only 5th graders and didn't understand how to act in middle school yet. So Lincoln and Clyde go back to being themselves by breaking out the cookies and business cards they were originally going to use on the tour, and the episode ends with everyone being on good terms. Overall, this episode may not be super amazing, but given what it was about and how relatable it was in my life, I'm definitely not overly critical of it. We got to see some of Lynn's backstory by exploring how miserable she was when she first came to middle school, and how she genuinely wanted to help her brother and his best friend not fall victim to what she went through. There's a lot of fan speculation saying her trying to be tough in middle school is the reason why she acts tough at home, especially towards her brother, but I cannot agree with that one way or another. Her not wanting to get bullied in school and learning to stand up for herself and then passing that advice on to her brother isn't necessarily a bad thing in context. Now, I'm not saying her acting like a technical bully at school is an excuse for her to display bully-like behavior at home. I'm also not saying being on the receiving end of humiliation by her classmates justifies similar behaviors towards her brother either. All I'm saying is that if you approach Lynn's character within the confines of this particular episode, you come to understand why her advice and overall behavior are rooted more in sympathy than hostility. She was just trying to look out for her brother's safety, and her willingness to fight the kids who are threatening to beat him up is what a good big sister should and would do. This may not be my favorite episode with Lynn as a central character, but in terms of relatability and authenticity in this particular setting, I can very much appreciate appreciate what she was trying and willing to do for someone who had not yet learned the ropes of middle school. As for Clink and McCloud, their roles felt organic since they didn't know what happens in middle school and were impressionable enough to follow Lynn's advice. Luckily, they weren't in any real danger, so at least they got out of there unscathed. In summary, the story and characters were presented as relatable, the humor was a little stale but not awful, and it laid the groundwork for the big status quo change that would later take place in Season 5. With that said, I give Middlemen an 8.5 out of 10. Well folks, that concludes my review of Middlemen. So I gotta ask, what did you guys think of this episode? Sound off in the comments below, and be sure to click that subscribe button for more Loud House related content. That's going to do it for me. I'll catch you guys for the next video, but until then, this is SteamTeamRedubUK, CC Trainor-Ling, signing off. Peace out, home slices.